make it move. There we go. It'll start going back up again. Okay? And the longer I keep doing this, the harder it is to get my score high, but it's doing okay. Okay? So you can try and see what's the highest possible score. Now, I haven't done a very good job here of keeping that black block moving, so you can imagine the scores could be much, much higher. Notice also for fun, I made it so that the score bounces off. Okay? So it doesn't go over the scores, which is just kind of make it a little harder, actually, so you can't go straight to that block. You have to think about the score being in the way. All right? So that's kind of cool. We're almost ready to ship this on the App Store. What else are we going to do? Let's go ahead and think about an important part of a game like this, which is pausing. Okay? Why would you ever want to pause this game? A lot of reasons. What if this game were in a suite of games where there was a tab bar and you were switching between games? When you switch to another game on a different tab, like Machismo or something, you would want this game to pause. And then when you went back to it, you would want to continue. Or what if I switch to another app? I go like this, and go switch to another app, and I'm doing some other things, you know, and then I come back to my game, it's like, oh, my score is ruined because it was sitting there doing nothing for all the time. I want it to pause and then continue when I come back. Or maybe I want to be able to just tap on it and pause, and then tap again to continue, right? So pausing and resuming would be really cool. So how can we make our game pause and resume? Well, we can take this start game and turn it pretty easily into resume game. And all we need to do that is check to see if the game has already started. Because if it's already started, that's going to be not. If not, red block. If we haven't started the game, then we need to create the red and black block. But otherwise, we can just fire up this accelerometer. And what we'll do to pause is we'll just stop the accelerometer. Okay, so I'm just going to say self.motionManager stop accelerometer updates. Okay, so I've just stopped the accelerometer from updating, okay, which is a pretty good thing. I also have pause scoring, okay, because I want to do that. Don't look too closely behind the curtain for that one. And then also I want my gravity direction to be back to being 0. Okay, I don't want my red thing to be trying to do gravity when it's paused, right? So that's all I really need to do to pause this game. So let's put a little tap gesture in that pauses the game and then continues the game. Okay? This now can be resume. And so I'm going to do a tap gesture. I'm going to do it in view did load. Told you I wasn't going to do anything in the storyboard. And so I'm just going to say self.view, add gesture recognizer, UI tap gesture, Alec. Init with target, self, action is going to be tap. Okay, that's it. So now I've added this tap gesture, so now let's make tap. And all tap needs to do is we can say if we're paused, then resume. Otherwise, pause. Okay, so we need an is paused. How are we going to tell if we're paused or not? Real easy, bool is paused. I'm just going to return if the motion manager's accelerometer is not active. Okay, so if the accelerometer in the motion manager is not active, then we must be paused. Okay? See what I did there? So let's go try this, see if this works. And this is going to work, but not quite exactly how we might want, as you'll see. All right, so let's go get some motion happening here first. All right, so we got this thing motion. I'm going to hit pause. Okay, so it paused, okay, but it paused in that my accelerometer is not working, but the red block still kind of kept moving. So here I turn it back on, gravity's back, I pause. It's like that red block keeps moving a long way. Okay, why does that red block keep moving? Well, because it already has a force applied to it, and it's just letting that force kind of play out. So what would be really nice when we pause is if we put some quicksand in here and everything kind of slowed down, right? I don't want everything to stop immediately, but I want things to kind of, you know, nicely slow down. Okay? So how do we add quicksand? Well, I can do that with another dynamic animator thing. Let's put this down here. I'm going to call it quicksand, in fact. All right? And so quicksand is just another behavior that I'm adding right here. And what does this quicksand look like? It's this. This is what I added. And it's a UI dynamic animator that has resistance. So resistance is a item's resistance to forces being applied to it. So if I'll start it out at 0, which means no resistance to it. That's the default. So it doesn't resist any of the forces. You know, the gravity, it doesn't resist any of that. Just things are bouncing around. And then when we pause, I'm going to crank this resistance up to like at least 1. 1 is it completely resists forces, so it'll slow down really quickly. But I can go even more than 1, which is it actively, you know, reduces its forces on it, its response to forces on it. But we got this quicksand. All we need to do is add both the red item, the red block, and the black block to the quicksand. Oops. Heck. I missed the copy key quite a bit. Okay, black block. Okay, so we'll put them both in this quicksand. And then we're just going to, when we pause, we're going to set the quicksand's resistance to, let's say, 10, which is pretty high resistance. They're going to slow down pretty fast with that. We could tweak that whether we want it to be that much. And then when we resume the game, we're going to set the quicksand's resistance back to 0. Okay? So let's do that. And I'm mostly doing this so that you can see the effect of pausing, because next we're going to show how to do pausing in a different circumstance. All right, so here, let's go. Get this guy going again. All right, he's moving around. Now if I pause, see how quickly he stopped? He's still spinning, but he has stopped his motion. And if I continue, now gravity's going to work on him again. One thing about stopping him so quickly, it allows you to cheat a little bit. Because if this guy's out of control and you're trying to get him back in control so you can get after the black block, this stopped him, right, too quick. So it might be that having 10 be our quicksand is a little too high. Maybe we only want 1. Okay, which would mean it would slow down kind of at a normal or a much slower rate. So you can play with that. All right, so when would we want to do pausing? Well, one of the real important places to pause is when someone clicks to go to another app. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides really briefly and show you this, and then we'll go back. So your application state, the life cycle of your application, it goes through certain states. And one of them is it's the active application. And being the active application means you're getting events. Your views are getting events, right? Touch events are happening to you. You're basically responding to the world. That only happens when you're the active application. Now, if you're the active application, you're bouncing, you're playing your game, what could cause you to stop being the active application? Well, obviously, someone could click on the home button and go to another app. But there's other things, too, that could happen. A phone call could come in on your iPhone. Okay? Now you're going to stop being the active app, whatever the UI is for handling the phone call. Even notifications, very important system notifications can come up, and you know, they gray out your app, they put an alert view in the middle, and some notification happened. That could make your app stop being active. Okay? So it's important to know when your app stops being active, like bouncer, so the bouncer can pause the game. So I like to think of active, the activeness of your application as being the pause resume of your application. Okay? So you find out about these. Your application delegate has these methods. Application did become active. Application will resign active. Right? That's going between the two states. But there's also a radio station for it. Okay, and that's important to understand that there's this radio station too. And so you can have view controllers like this bouncer guy listen to the radio station and find this out and do the pausing. And so we're going to do that in the demo in a second. While I'm here, though, let me talk about some other application state things. One of them is background foreground, which is a different thing than active, not active. Okay? Active means you're in the foreground and you're receiving events. Okay? When someone clicks to go on some other app, you stop being active, but you're not in the background yet. You can think of background as kind of being shelved. Okay, you're being put on the shelf. And when you're put on the shelf, you don't run. The only time you're ever going to run when you're on the shelf is a background fetch, which we saw a couple weeks ago, or you're a special kind of app, like a VoIP app or a location services app where you're getting location. Then you can come off the shelf and run for a little bit occasionally, but you're being shelved. So background is shelving. Active is just, you might still be the app that the user is using, but something has happened to interrupt that maybe temporarily. So active is whether you're receiving events. It's kind of a pause or zoom. Background is shelved. So before you get shelved, you want to definitely make sure your world's cleaned up and everything's in a nice state, because one thing, the shelf can sometimes be cleaned off and you're thrown out, okay? If memory became a problem or something like that, you could just completely never run again. So when you get put in the background, you want to know about that maybe, but you find out when you come back in the foreground too. So, you know, then you can undo. Usually in the foreground one, you undo what you did in the background one. There are some other application delegate items of interest that you can look up in the documentation. One is local notifications. Local notifications are a way for you to schedule something to happen in your app at a certain date and time. And when that happens, if your application is not running, you can be launched to handle it, okay? So it's a way to kind of make sure your app runs at a certain time. So like the calendar app, this is how it would make sure that you got reminded that you're supposed to go to class or whatever, even if the calendar app is not even running, okay? So local notification, something to look at. State restoration, if you got put on the shelf and then you got killed and the user ran you again, you don't want your UI to come up like in some base start UI. You still want it to come back to where it was when you got put on the shelf. So state restoration is a formalism for making you keep track of where your UI is, so that when you can put on the shelf, if you get killed and have to come back, you can restore your state to where it was. Data protection is an interesting one. There are ways to protect files that say, if this device is locked, in other words, at the lock screen, then you can't access this file. But if it's unlocked, you can. So that's kind of a special kind of protection. You can find out about changes in that, i.e. when the thing is locked and unlocked, and also there's method in there for finding out currently is it locked or not. Then there's also OpenURL. OpenURL is kind of a cool thing. You can go into Xcode. If you go to the info tab there in project settings, you can define a URL like not HTTP colon something, but like Photomania colon something, for example, if Photomania wanted to do it. And then if other people in other apps say OpenURL, Photomania colon / something, 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 question mark, this, that, all the full URL things you can do in the world of URLs, then Photomania would get launched to go handle that URL. Okay, and there'll be an application delegate method called handle this URL. So that's another thing to look at in application delegate. Okay, so that's it. So I covered all I wanted to cover on that. But now let's go back to Bouncer and show using this. I'm going to pause when I stop being active, and I'm going to unpause when I go back to being active. And the way I'm going to do that, very simple. NS notification center, default center, add observer for name. And the one I want is UI application will resign active. Okay, so that happens when I'm going to resign being the active application. And object nil, I don't really care who this comes from. It's going to come from the application and whatever application object. Queue, fine to do it on this queue that I'm calling this from. And then here's the block I want to do. In my app, really simple, self pause game. Okay, I'm going to resign being the active application, so I'm going to pause. And similarly, I can do the same thing when I come back, but here it's UI application did become active, and here I want to resume. Okay, so let's see if this works. All right, so let's get this doing something